The warning came at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador stood in her private chambers when the alarm tore through the silence. Her crystalline body flickered with pale blue light as fear flooded her ancient mind. She had lived for 12,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched stars die and new worlds born, but she had never heard this alarm before. No one had, not in 3,000 years. She rushed through the corridors of the great station, her footsteps echoing against walls made of living metal. Other ambassadors joined her, creatures of every shape and size, with their 1,000 eyes, the warriors with their armored shells, the floating consciousness of the Etherian collective. All of them moved toward the council chamber with the same look of disbelief on their faces. The containment field around the Sol system had been breached. Remembered learning about the humans when she was young. Every child in the Galactic Conquered learned about them. They were the great warning, the example of what could go wrong when evolution took a dark path. The humans were a species born in violence. They killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. They split the atom and used it to burn their own cities. They poisoned their own air and water. They were brilliant and terrible, creative and destructive. The founders of the Conquered had discovered them 3,000 years ago during the Great Expansion. A small team of scientists had visited the blue planet called Earth. They had watched the humans from orbit, studied their broadcasts, learned their languages. What they found horrified them. The humans were fighting a war that covered their entire world. Millions were dying, cities were burning, and even as they destroyed themselves, they were reaching for the stars. They had sent machines to their moon. They were building rockets. They were looking up at the night sky with hungry eyes. The Conquered held an emergency meeting. The debate lasted for years. Some wanted to make contact to guide the humans toward peace. Others wanted to destroy them before they could spread their violence to the stars. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would do nothing. A containment field was built around the Sol system. It was invisible, undetectable by human technology. Any ship that tried to leave would simply find itself turned around, flying in circles without knowing it. The humans would be trapped in their own solar system, left to face whatever fate they created for themselves. Most believed they would destroy themselves within a few centuries. The projections were clear. A species so violent, so divided, could not survive. They would burn their world or poison it or tear each other apart. The problem would solve itself. 3,000 years passed. The Conquered grew and prospered. New species were discovered and uplifted into galactic civilization. Wars became rare, then almost unknown. The great races learned to live in peace under the careful guidance of the Council, and slowly the humans were forgotten. Until now, entered the Council chamber and stopped. The massive holographic display dominated the center of the room, showing real-time footage from the border of the Sol system. The containment field was visible as a shimmering wall of energy stretching across the void of space. There was a hole in it. Not a failure, not a malfunction. Something had punched through from the inside. The edges of the breach were still glowing with the heat of whatever had torn through them. High Arbiter OK floated at the center of the chamber. He was the oldest living being in the Conquered, a creature of pure thought housed in a shell of dark matter. His voice echoed in the minds of everyone present. "They survived," he said. The words carried a weight of disbelief that had never heard from him before. They survived and they escaped. The display shifted, zooming in on the breach. A ship was emerging from the other side, felt her crystalline heart stop. The vessel was enormous. It was not beautiful like Conquered ships with their flowing lines and elegant curves. This ship was brutal, angular, ugly. Its hull was covered in scars and patches as if it had been rebuilt 1,000 times. Weapons bristled from every surface. Sensor arrays swept the void like the eyes of a predator waking from a long sleep. The ship looked like it had been built by creatures who expected everything to try to kill them. Because for humans, everything always had. A transmission came through. The ship was broadcasting on every frequency, in every language known to the Conquered and thousands more. The message played across the council chamber and felt the words burn into her memory. "This is the UES Perseverance, representing the United Earth Systems. We come in peace, but we are prepared for war." Silence filled the chamber. 1,000 ambassadors from 1,000 worlds stood frozen. They had believed the humans were primitive. They had believed the humans were doomed. They had locked them away and forgotten about them, confident that the problem would disappear on its own. They had been wrong. "How is this possible?" someone asked. "Our projections showed extinction. They should have destroyed themselves." Okay's voice was quiet. "Our projections were based on the assumption that they would remain divided, that their hatred for each other would prevent them from ever working together." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something in his voice that had never heard before. It took her a moment to recognize it. "Fear. We gave them a common enemy," Okay said. "Us." The display showed more data streaming in from observation posts. The ship called Perseverance was moving slowly, carefully, making no aggressive moves, but its weapons were hot. Its shields were up. It was ready to fight at a moment's notice. "What do we do?" asked. Okay turned to face the assembly. His 1,000 eyes blinked in patterns that showed deep thought. When he finally spoke, his words sealed the fate of the galaxy. "We remind them why they were caged in the first place. We show them that the galactic conquered is not to be challenged. We send a fleet and we give them a choice: surrender or be destroyed." Wanted to object. She wanted to say that this was wrong, that violence would only breed more violence. But she stayed silent. Like everyone else in the chamber, she was too afraid to speak. The order was given. A patrol fleet was dispatched to intercept the human vessel. None of them would return. Commander stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and watched the stars. For 60 years, she had dreamed of this moment. For 60 years, she had trained and fought and sacrificed. Now she was standing where no human had ever stood before, looking at stars that no human had ever seen with their own eyes. She was 73 years old. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with wrinkles. Her body carried the scars of a lifetime of struggle, but her eyes were sharp and her mind was clear. She had a mission to complete. Behind her, the bridge crew worked at their stations. They were young, most of them, born on the ship, raised in the void between stars. They had never seen Earth's blue skies or felt its wind on their faces. They had only heard stories from their parents and grandparents, stories of a world they would never know. Remembered Earth. She remembered the day everything changed. She had been 13 years old when the scientists made their discovery. Humans had been sending probes to the edge of the solar system for decades, trying to understand the strange readings they kept detecting. Finally, one probe got close enough to touch the barrier. It was like the whole world woke up from a dream. Suddenly, everything made sense. The strange signals from deep space that never seemed to reach Earth. The probes that vanished when they traveled too far from the sun. The math that never quite worked out right. Humanity was trapped. Someone had built a cage around their solar system and left them to die. The wars stopped almost overnight. Countries that had been enemies for centuries put aside their differences. It did not matter if you were rich or poor, east or west, one religion or another. You were human, and humans were prisoners. The next decades were the hardest in human history. Every resource was directed toward one goal: escape. Factories that had built weapons now built ship parts. Scientists who had designed missiles now designed engines. The whole world worked together for the first time in history. But it came at a terrible cost. The economy collapsed. Food became scarce. Billions died from hunger and disease. Governments fell. New ones rose. Sometimes the violence returned and people had to be reminded why they were fighting. Remembered the day her parents died, a food riot in what used to be called Spain. She was 17. She joined the military the next day, not to fight other humans but to protect the shipyards, to guard the dream. The Perseverance took 40 years to build. It was not pretty, it was not elegant. It was made from whatever could be found and whatever could be built. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals. Its systems were a mix of technologies from a dozen countries. Nothing matched. Nothing was perfect. But it worked. Rose through the ranks. She fought in 3 civil wars, not against humans, but against despair. Against people who had given up hope. Against leaders who wanted to use the crisis for their own power. By the time she was 50, she was the most respected military commander on Earth. They chose her to lead the Perseverance, to be the first human to leave the solar system, to speak for all of humanity. The day they launched, 8 billion people were dead. Only 2 billion remained on Earth and another 500 million on colonies scattered across the solar system. The survivors gathered to watch the ship leave. They did not cheer. They were too tired for that, too broken. They simply watched in silence as humanity's last hope flew toward the stars. It took 5 years to reach the barrier. 5 years of travel through empty space, with nothing but the stars for company. When they finally arrived, stood on this same bridge and watched as the ship's weapons charged. The barrier was strong. It had been built to last forever, but humans had learned a lot about breaking things. They had thousands of years of practice. It took everything they had, every weapon fired at once. Every engine pushed to the breaking point. The ship shook and screamed and nearly tore itself apart. But the barrier cracked, and then it broke. Remembered crying. She was not ashamed of it. Everyone on the bridge had cried. Now they were through, now they were free. And now, according to sensors, a fleet of ships was approaching. "Commander," said Lieutenant Park, her second in command. 12 vessels incoming, unknown design. They are hailing us." Straightened her uniform. It was old and worn like everything else on the ship, but she wore it with pride. "Put them on screen." The display flickered to life. Found herself looking at a creature made of living light. It was beautiful in a strange way, shifting through colors that had no name in human language. "I am Tal, commander of the conquered patrol fleet," the creature said. "You have committed a grave violation of galactic law. Your species was condemned by the Council. You were to remain in your system until your natural extinction. You will surrender your vessel immediately and return to the Sol system. If you comply, this transgression may be forgiven." Felt something cold settle in her chest. She had hoped they were wrong. She had hoped the barrier was some kind of mistake, some natural phenomenon they did not understand. But no, someone had put them in a cage on purpose. Someone had watched them suffer and die and done nothing. She thought about her parents, about the billions who had starved, about the children who grew up in darkness so that others could reach the light. "Let me make sure I understand," said. Her voice was calm, quiet, dangerous. 3,000 years ago, your people found us. You decided we were too violent, so you locked us in our own solar system and left us to die. Is that correct?" Tal flickered with what might have been confusion. "That is an accurate summary. Your species was deemed a threat to galactic peace." "A threat," laughed. It was not a happy sound. "We were children playing with sticks when you found us. We had not even left our own planet yet, and you called us a threat. The projections were clear. Your species would have spread violence across the galaxy." "The projections were wrong," stepped forward. "We did not destroy ourselves. We survived. We came together. We built this ship with our bare hands while our world burned around us. 8 billion people died so that we could be standing here right now." Her voice hardened. "And you want us to turn around and go back? If you do not comply, we will be forced to take action." Looked at the 12 ships on her display. They were sleek and beautiful, advanced beyond anything humans had ever built. By any reasonable measure, the Perseverance was outmatched. She smiled. "Lieutenant Park, sound general quarters." Alarms rang through the ship. Crew members rushed to their stations. Weapons powered up, shields activated. "Commander," Tal said, his light flickering faster now. "This is foolish. You cannot possibly win." Sat down in her captain's chair. The leather was cracked and worn. She had sat in this chair 1,000 times, preparing for battles that never came. Now, finally, she knew what she had been training for. "Maybe not," she said, "but we are going to make you remember us." The first shots were fired. The battle of first contact had begun. 18 minutes later, it was over. 12 conquered ships drifted as burning wreckage. The Perseverance, damaged but intact, continued on its course. And the galaxy learned to fear. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, creatures of every shape and size watched the recordings with disbelief. The battle had been captured by observation drones and broadcast to every corner of civilized space. They watched the primitive human vessel tear through the conquered patrol fleet like a blade through paper. They watched ships that should have been invincible explode into fragments. They watched Commander Tal's flagship break apart in a ball of nuclear fire. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Conquered had lost a battle. In the council chamber of the Great Station, High Arbiter OK called an emergency session. Every ambassador who could attend was there. Those who could not sent representatives. The chamber was filled with fear and anger and something else. Something that many of these ancient species had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. "This is impossible," said Ambassador Al of the Collective. His armored shell clicked with agitation. "One ship, one primitive ship defeated an entire patrol fleet. Our shields are supposed to be impenetrable. Their weapons do not use energy. said a soft voice from the corner. Everyone turned to look at Chief Analyst Mora, a small being covered in soft fur. She was the Concord's leading expert on warfare, a subject that most species had stopped studying long ago. Human weapons use kinetic force and chemical reactions. Our shields are designed to deflect energy-based attacks. Lasers, plasma, directed particles. The humans threw metal and explosives at us. That is absurd, Al said. Those are the weapons of primitives. Those primitives just destroyed 12 of our ships. Mora's voice was calm but firm. We have become too advanced for our own good. We forgot that a rock thrown hard enough can still kill. OK floated forward. His ancient mind was racing through possibilities, calculations, and fears. He had led the Conquered for 10,000 years. He had guided it through crises that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. But this was different. This was something he did not understand. Tell me about the humans, he said. Not the old reports, tell me what we know now. Mora activated a holographic display. Images of the Perseverance appeared, along with data streams from the battle. The human ship is approximately 3 kilometers long. It carries a crew of roughly 50,000. Based on our analysis, it was built over a period of 40 standard years using precontact technology. She paused. That should be impossible. Building a ship of that size requires resources that a single planet cannot provide. Then how did they do it? They sacrificed everything. Mora pulled up more images, recordings from human broadcasts that the Conquered had been monitoring for centuries. When they discovered our containment field, they stopped fighting each other, completely. Every nation, every faction, every individual worked toward one goal. They strip-mined their planet. They emptied their oceans. They let their people starve so they could build this ship. The chamber was silent. The idea was hard to grasp. The Conquered species had not known true scarcity for. They could not imagine choosing between food and freedom. They could not imagine parents watching their children go hungry so that strangers could fly to the stars. Their technology is primitive, Mora continued. But it is designed with a philosophy we do not understand. Every system has backups. Every backup has backups. Their ship can lose half its components and still function. Their weapons can be fired manually if the computers fail. They build as if they expect everything to go wrong. Why would anyone build like that? Asked. Mora looked at her with sad eyes. Because everything has always gone wrong for them. They evolved on a death world. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, wars. They have been fighting for survival since the moment their species began. They do not know any other way. OK absorbed this information. He thought about the containment field built so long ago by ancestors who feared what the humans might become. They had been right to fear, but they had also been wrong. They thought the cage would break the humans. Instead, it had only made them stronger. We cannot let them spread, he said finally. Their violence will infect the entire galaxy. We must stop them now before they grow too powerful. He turned to face the assembly. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that came from 10,000 years of leadership. I am calling for a grand armada. Every species that has ships will contribute. We will gather the largest fleet in galactic history, and we will show these humans that their victory was a mistake. They caught us by surprise once. It will not happen again. The vote was held. It was nearly unanimous. Only Ambassador voted against, and her objection was noted but ignored. Over the next 3 months, the Armada assembled. Ships came from every corner of the galaxy. The elegant cruisers of the massive dreadnoughts of the Collective, the living vessels of the Bioshapers, the ancient warships of the Etherian pulled out of museums where they had rested for centuries. 10,000 ships, 40 different species, enough firepower to crack planets. Meanwhile, the Perseverance had stopped. It floated in empty space, making no aggressive moves. Commander had broadcast messages of peace, asking for dialogue. She wanted to talk. She wanted to understand why humanity had been imprisoned. She wanted to find a way forward without more bloodshed. The Conquered ignored her messages. They did not want peace. They wanted submission. When the Armada finally arrived, it surrounded the Perseverance on all sides. The human ship looked tiny compared to the vast fleet that faced it, a single vessel against an ocean of enemies. OK himself led the Armada from his flagship, the Eternal Light. It was the largest ship ever built, a mobile command center that could control the entire fleet with a thought. He opened a channel to the human vessel. Commander, I am High Arbiter, OK, leader of the Galactic Conquered. You have committed crimes against galactic civilization. You have destroyed conquered vessels and killed conquered citizens. You will surrender your ship immediately. Your crew will be taken into custody. Your species will be judged by the Council. There was a pause, then's face appeared on his display. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes and her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. Arbiter, OK, I have spent 3 months asking for peace. I have explained what your ancestors did to us. I have told you about the billions who died because of your containment field. I have begged for understanding. She shook her head slowly. You sent 10,000 ships. You left us no choice. Your species is too dangerous. Dangerous? Laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes, I suppose we are. Your ancestors were right about that. We are violent. We are aggressive. We solve problems by fighting them. It is in our blood. She leaned forward. But we are not evil. We do not cage innocent species and leave them to die. We do not ignore the suffering of others because it is convenient. You are in no position to lecture us on morality. Maybe not, stood up. But I am in a position to make a choice. And I choose to stand, I choose to fight, not because I think we can win, but because some things are worth dying for. She turned to her crew. They were all watching her, waiting, trusting. General quarters, she said. All hands to battle stations. OK watched as the tiny human ship powered up its weapons. He felt a flicker of something he had not felt in centuries. Admiration. Here was a species that knew it was going to die and refused to run. Foolish creatures, he whispered. Then louder, all ships opened fire. The Battle of the Veil began. The first wave of missiles hit the Perseverance like a hammer made of stars. Commander gripped her chair as the ship shook around her. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. Damage reports flooded in from every section. But the ship held. The shields that conquered weapons could not understand absorbed some of the impact. The thick, ugly armor plating took the rest. Return fire, ordered. All batteries target their engines. The Perseverance answered with a roar of its own, hurled metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missile tubes emptied their contents into the void. Nuclear warheads detonated against conquered shields, and for the first time, the aliens learned what it felt like to fight humans. It was not elegant, it was not beautiful, it was brutal, savage, and terrifying. The conquered ships expected clean battles. Energy beams exchanging fire at precise distances, careful maneuvers calculated by advanced computers, war as mathematics, as art, as science. The humans fought like animals trapped in a corner. They charged directly into the enemy formation. They rammed ships when their weapons ran dry. They targeted life support systems and fuel storage. They did not fight to win. They fought to hurt. The first day cost the conquered 500 ships. The Perseverance lost 30% of its weapons and 10,000 crew members, held funerals between battles, saying the names of the dead while missiles flew around them. The second day was worse. The conquered adapted. They spread out using their numbers to attack from all directions at once. The Perseverance spun and twisted, its engines screaming with effort, used tactics from Earth's ancient wars, feints, ambushes, retreats that turned into traps. On the third day, she ordered the ship's speakers to broadcast music. Old songs from Earth, songs of defiance, songs of hope, songs that had been sung by soldiers going into battles they knew they could not win. The conquered commanders did not understand. Why would anyone sing while dying? But the humans understood. The music reminded them of home. It reminded them of why they were fighting. It reminded them that even if they died here, they were dying free. By the fifth day, the conquered had lost 2,000 ships. Commanders began to question their orders. Some refused to advance. Others retreated without permission. The humans were supposed to be easy prey. Instead, they were a nightmare. They will not stop, Admiral Al reported to OK. His voice was shaking. We destroy their weapons and they fire more. We breach their hull and they seal it. I watched one of their crew members fly into space without a suit to repair an external cannon. He died out there, but the cannon fired again. He paused. What kind of species does that? OK had no answer. He had lived for 10,000 years. He had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans did not fight like rational beings. They fought like they had nothing to lose. Because they did not. The sixth day brought new horrors. The Perseverance was falling apart. Half its engines were gone, most of its weapons were destroyed or empty. The hull was more patches than original metal, but it kept fighting, it kept moving, it kept killing. Stood on a bridge that was barely functional. Smoke filled the air. Wounded crew members worked at damaged stations. The floor was slippery with blood. She had not slept in 4 days. She had not eaten in 2, but she refused to stop. "Status report," she said. Lieutenant Park's voice came through the static. "We have approximately 15% combat capability remaining. Ammunition is nearly exhausted. Reactor 2 has gone critical and we had to eject it. We have maybe 6 hours before we lose life support." 6 hours, closed her eyes. She thought about Earth, about the people who had given everything so this ship could fly, about her parents dead in a food riot when she was 17, about all the children who would never grow up because there was not enough food. "Then we make these 6 hours count," she said. "All hands prepare for final assault." The Perseverance turned toward the Eternal Light, OK's flagship. If they were going to die, they would take the head of the snake with them. The 8th day arrived. The human ship was a wreck. It drifted more than it flew. Its weapons fired one at a time because there was not enough power for more. But it was still moving, still fighting, still refusing to die. OK prepared the killing blow. The Eternal Light carried a weapon called a star lance, powerful enough to crack a planet. He had hoped he would not need to use it. He had wanted to capture the humans alive, to study them, to understand them. But they had left him no choice. "Charge the star lance," he ordered. "End this." The weapon hummed to life. Energy gathered at the front of his flagship, building into a ball of pure destruction. In 30 seconds, the Perseverance would be nothing but atoms. Then the sensors went insane. "Arbiter," his sensor officer screamed. "Multiple breaches in the containment field, hundreds of them." OK spun to look at the display. The containment field around the Sol system was lighting up like a festival. Holes were opening everywhere, punched through by weapons fire from the other side. Ships poured through the gaps, not warships. These were something else entirely. Colony ships with guns welded to their hulls, mining vessels with drill heads converted to weapons, cargo haulers carrying missiles in their holds, passenger liners with their windows sealed and rail guns mounted on their decks. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands, every vessel humanity had left coming through the barrier at once. 8 billion humans had died so that survivors could escape. Those survivors had not run. They had not hidden. They had spent 3 months building weapons, 3 months preparing, 3 months waiting. And now they had come to save their people. Saw them on her flickering display. She saw the ragged fleet of desperate ships flying toward the conquered armada. She saw humans who had nothing but hope and hatred and love, throwing themselves into battle against an enemy that outclassed them in every way. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. She laughed because it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "All ships," she broadcast. "This is Commander of the Perseverance. Welcome to the fight." The conquered armada found itself caught between the damaged Perseverance and a swarm of human vessels. The newcomers were not military. They did not fight in formation. They attacked in clusters, in waves, in chaos. They crashed into conquered ships and detonated their engines. They fired everything they had and then used their ships as weapons. It was madness, it was suicide, it was beautiful. OK watched his armada crumble. Ships that had served the conquered for centuries were being destroyed by mining vessels. His perfect formation was breaking apart. His commanders were panicking. And through it all, the humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying so that others could live. "Retreat," he ordered. His voice was hollow. "All ships retreat." The armada scattered. 10,000 ships that had come to destroy one vessel fled in every direction. They had the technology, they had the numbers, they had everything except the one thing that mattered. They did not have the will to die. The humans did, and that made all the difference. Watch the enemy flee. She watched the stars clear of conquered ships. She watched her people, her beautiful, stubborn, impossible people, celebrate their impossible victory. Then she collapsed. The doctors caught her before she hit the floor. They carried her to the medical bay, past cheering crew members, past crying engineers, past soldiers who had given up hope and found it again. Humanity had won, against all odds, against all logic, against the entire galaxy. They had won, the galaxy had changed. In the months following the Battle of the Veil, the Galactic Concord fell apart like a house built on sand. Species that had obeyed the Council for suddenly remembered that obedience was a choice. Worlds that had been quiet and compliant erupted in protests and revolutions. The myth of conquered invincibility had been shattered, and with it went the fear that had held everything together. High Arbiter OK retreated to his flagship and refused to speak to anyone. His 1,000 eyes stared at nothing. He had lived for 10,000 years, led the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known, and watched it all crumble because of one species he had dismissed as primitive. Ambassador was the first to reach out to the humans. She found Commander in a medical bay aboard one of the human colony ships. The Perseverance was being repaired, slowly rebuilt by crews who treated every piece of metal like a sacred relic. Herself was recovering from exhaustion, malnutrition, and wounds she had ignored during the battle. Had expected to find a warrior, a conqueror, someone drunk on victory and hungry for more. Instead, she found a tired old woman sitting up in a hospital bed, reading reports on a cracked tablet. Ambassador said, her voice was rough but not unkind. I wondered when someone would come to talk. His crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. I wanted to understand. Before the war, you sent messages asking for peace. Even after we assembled the armada, you tried to negotiate. Why? Set down her tablet. She was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. Do you know what war costs? She asked finally. Not in ships or resources, in people, in futures. Every person who dies in battle is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. She looked at with eyes that had seen too much death. I have been a soldier my entire life. I know how to fight. I know how to kill. But I also know that every war leaves scars that never heal. I did not want to fight you. I wanted to understand why you had caged us. I wanted to find another way. But you were prepared to fight. Always smiled, but it was a sad smile. That is what humans do. We hope for peace and prepare for war, because we have learned that hope alone is not enough. Moved closer. Your species confuses me. You are capable of such violence, such destruction, but also such sacrifice. Your people flew into battle with weapons made from mining equipment. They died so strangers could live. How can both things be true? Considered the question. She thought about human history, about the wars and the genocides and the cruelty, but also about the heroes, the people who ran into burning buildings to save children, the soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to protect their friends, the ordinary men and women who chose to be extraordinary when it mattered most. We contain multitudes, she said finally. We are capable of the worst things imaginable, but we are also capable of the best. The same passion that drives us to fight also drives us to love, to protect, to sacrifice. We are not good or evil. We are human, and that means we always have a choice. She met's gaze directly. Your ancestors looked at us and saw only the darkness. They decided we were too dangerous to live among the stars, so they locked us away and left us to die, but they forgot something important. Leaned forward. The same fire that destroys can also warm. The same strength that kills can also protect. You tried to cage the worst of us. Instead, you united us. You brought out the best. Was silent for a long time. Her crystalline form shifted through colors that did not recognize. Finally, she spoke. What do you want now? You have defeated us. The conquered is broken. You could conquer the galaxy if you wished. Nothing could stop you. Laughed. It was a real laugh this time, full of genuine amusement. Conquer? Why would we want that? We did not escape one prison just to build another. She shook her head. We want what we have always wanted, to live, to grow, to explore, to meet other species and learn from them. Her expression softened. We want to belong, not as masters or slaves, but as equals. Even after what we did to you. Especially after that. Reached out and took crystalline hand. The ambassador flinched but did not pull away. 3,000 years ago, your ancestors made a mistake. They acted out of fear. I understand fear. I have lived with it my entire life, but fear is not a good foundation for civilization. We would like to build something better. The conversation lasted for hours, then days, then weeks. More ambassadors came, representatives from species that had fled the battle, curious about the humans who had refused to chase them. Leaders from worlds that had never joined the conquered, who wanted to meet the species that had broken it. What emerged was something new, not a conquered, not an empire. A loose alliance of worlds bound together by a simple promise. No species would be abandoned. No world would be left behind. No people would be caged and forgotten. They called it the New Accord, was asked to lead it. She refused. "I am a soldier," she told the assembly of species that had gathered to form the new government. "I know how to fight wars, but building peace requires a different kind of strength. Find someone who knows how to create, not destroy. I have done my part." She returned to the Perseverance. The old ship had been repaired, upgraded, and transformed. It was no longer a desperate ark fleeing a dying world. It was a symbol, a reminder of what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. Spent her remaining years exploring the galaxy she had dreamed about since childhood. She visited worlds of crystal and worlds of fire. She met species that breathed methane and species that existed as pure thought. She saw wonders that human language could not describe. But her greatest joy came from a different mission. The Conquered had imprisoned more than just humanity. Over the dozens of species had been deemed too dangerous, too violent, or too strange. They had been contained in their own solar systems, left to struggle and die alone. Humanity found them, every single one. Some had destroyed themselves just as the Conquered had predicted, but others had survived. Others had grown. Others had waited, just like humanity, for someone to remember them. Was there when the first containment field was brought down. She watched as a species called the, who had been trapped for 5,000 years, flew into open space for the first time. Their joy was indescribable. Their gratitude was overwhelming. "Why?" the leader asked her. "Why would you help us? You do not know us. We could be dangerous. We could be enemies." Smiled, it was the same question she had been asked 100 times. "Because someone should have done it for us," she said. "Because we know what it feels like to be forgotten, and because this is what humans do. We fight, we survive, and then we make sure others can do the same." She died at the age of 94, surrounded by crew members who had become family. Her last words were simple: "I got to see the stars." The galaxy mourned her. 1,000 species that had never met her lit funeral fires in her honor. The New Accord declared a day of remembrance. The Perseverance was preserved as a museum, a monument to the stubborn courage that had changed everything. And in the archives of the former Conquered, the entry on humanity was updated. Where once it had read dangerous, violent, to be contained, it now read something different. Humanity, a species that was caged by fear and freed themselves through fire. They could have conquered the galaxy. Instead, they chose to heal it, approach with respect, approach with wonder, and never ever underestimate them. The stars no longer cried out in fear when human ships appeared. They watched with hope, because humanity had come. And humanity remembered what it was like to be alone.